Does this add to my health? Does this add to my wealth? Does this add to my joy in some way, or does this add to the impact that I'm giving? And if it didn't fall in one of those, it wasn't for me.
Welcome to the Couplepreneur Life podcast. In this episode, we have a wonderful guest. Her name is Candy Valentino. Candy Valentino is a wealth expert. She is also a successful, successful founder, entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist. She started her very first business when she was
19. I know.
19 years old.
I'm so excited with the interview because she's so cool. A cool story. Grew up in a trailer. Started her first business when she was 19 and just took it from there.
Yes.
A lot of great information. You're going to enjoy the interview. One note on this interview, though, is we found out that we were having a little bit of audio technical difficulties on our part.
Yes.
So I think it sounds a little hollow. But bear with it. Listen.
It's totally worth it.
She has great information. Check it out. All right, Candy Valentino, welcome to the podcast.
So glad you're here.
Oh my gosh, guys. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's so fun.
Yes.
And as we're recording this, I know we're doing this, but I know that we'll see you next week because you're a speaker at Couplepreneur Con.
Yes.
Which we're excited about.
Cannot
as well.
wait.
So
looking forward to it. Yeah.
You'll be bringing it there too. So all right.
And as we mentioned, Candy is the author of Wealth Habits, and we're going to go over quite a few things in her book today.
Wealth Habits, 6 Ordinary Steps to Achieve Extraordinary Financial Freedom.
Absolutely.
And I needed this. I'm a simple guy, and Candy gets right to it here, makes it very clear and fun. Maybe even the IRS sound a little sexy. But that's all right. It's good to have you here, Candy.
Thanks so much, Candy. So we've got a question. Your very first question, or where did you first perceive the concept of investing? Like, what age were you? What was going on in your life?
So actually investing, I would say I was about 19, 20 years old. I started my first company when I was 19. And I realized really quickly that, I had an SBA loan. I had a 6-week run rate. I started with 7 employees. So I had 45 days to figure out how to make this work, how to make payroll for all of these people that trusted me to come work for me.
No problem.
And so I realized really quickly that, I needed to figure this out, and I didn't have an education. That's why a lot of the stuff in the book is so simple, because I don't have a fancy degree. I didn't come from some, wealthy family. My dad's a mechanic. My mom cleaned houses. And so the topic of money was more about what we didn't have. It was more about survival than intention or building wealth. So I bought a couple books when I was 19, 20 years old and started to just read through self-education of actually how to start investing.
Wow. What was the first business I have to know at age 19?
Yeah. So age 19, before they were a thing, back in the late 90s, I started wellness spas. That industry wasn't really popular. The closest one was about an hour and a half from where I started mine. And I just knew that there were a lot of women that would like these services, but just wasn't going to drive an hour and a half to get them. And sure enough, we were a pioneer in the space, and it really took off.
No kidding.
So I was going to ask, so how did it go? Your first, entrepreneur experience?
It went better than I had thought. It was interesting when you're that young, you have to have belief. You have to have belief more than your fear. And I think that that's really what it boils down to, no matter what age we are, no matter what we want to accomplish, no matter what next level we want to do, what we want to invest in or business we want to build. Like, we have to have belief greater than the fear. And I was probably just naive enough to think that if somebody else out there could do this, and remember back then, there were no boss babes or women empowerment. It was a very empty, narrow field for women in business. And so, but I knew a few. And that's all you need. Like, you just have to have proof of other people that have already accomplished what you want to accomplish. And it's like, oftentimes we look at all the facts of why maybe we can't do something. Like, well, I came from this really bad childhood, or I was this or that. I don't have this exposure. But if you just find a few people who did it anyways, who did it regardless of their circumstance, then you know that it's available for you too. So that's what I kept my focus on as I continued to build, and obviously was able to retire and exit my companies and build other companies and investments by the time I was 40. So that was my goal, and that's what I set out to do.
And that's what you're doing for other people now too, right? You're now the person that younger women or anyone can look up to and say, okay, she did it at 19. Why can't I?
Yeah, and I mentioned, I have the book here. I've read the book. I have it marked up, And so, I want to recommend the book here, Wealth Habits, 6 Ordinary Steps to Achieve Extraordinary Financial Freedom. Because, Candy, you do, it is simple, but simple is hard to do. So it's not that, to make things simple, it takes a little bit of genius in my opinion, to be able to make things simple. These are very, complex subjects that are made simple. And so definitely, this is a recommended read, very, very powerful.
Definitely.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So, well, I wanted to hit on the mindset thing. I want to touch on the mindset because that's in here, and quite frankly, we're going to talk about that. I want to talk about that on the, with our club members. Yep. Okay. All right. Because they're my favorite chapters. But that mindset, how did you overcome that mindset? I mean, you kind of just threw it out there, like, I decided, but,
I'm having a father that's a mechanic, a mom that cleans houses.
Right. You're a young girl from Pittsburgh. Okay, which, all right, during a time when there wasn't a lot, you didn't have a lot of role models. We saw a lot of women out there that started from nothing and were successful, all right? And as you mentioned, right, your parents weren't money, all right? You come from that, which we come from, blue collar background. How did you overcome that kind of mindset?
So the interesting thing, I'd say my first exposure to it, I'll start there. I was 15. I was in the trailer that we grew up in. I was on government assistance when I was first born because my parents were 16 and 19. So who wouldn't be at those ages, And I remember flipping through TV at the time and just trying to find something. It was 3 a.m. in the morning, something like that. If you remember the late 90s, what was on at 3 a.m.? Infomercials.
Yes.
Right? The knives. But wait, there's more.
Carlton Sheets was the one I remember. Carlton Sheets, right?
Yeah, right? Yeah, the graters and all the different things.
Yes.
And I just happened to land on something. And what caught my attention were all of these palm trees. And I just, growing up in rural Pennsylvania, like you just didn't see palm trees, And so there were just all these palm trees in this beautiful resort and this guy sitting there talking. And I just remember pausing. Something about it got me to pause long enough. And I didn't know at the time who this guy was, but now it was Tony Robbins in one of his first infomercials for personal power. And I heard him saying things that I'd never heard anyone say before. And it just resonated. Like, rather than questioning the feeling of you're not a product of your circumstances, and I don't know what part of this quote is his and what has been redacted to mine lately, but you're not a product of your circumstances. What we are is a product of our choices and our decisions. And we don't get to decide what happens to us, but we always get to decide what's next. And I just felt this check in my soul that I chose not to question, because I think that people get those in their lives. I think that we get that instinct, we get that gut check. We have a belief, something that we want to do. And rather than just following it, we allow our mind to kick in. I think there's like 1/2 of 1 second before our unconscious wiring starts to dictate what we were going to do next. And so I just thought, you know what? This exposure of what I've had to life is not what I want to continue to do. So why not, right? Like, why not try something different? And so the next day I was in school and I wrote my first set of goals in my high school cafeteria. And I was 15. I said I wanted to do them by the time I was 30, because that's really old when you're 15, right?
60 is the new 30 now, I say.
That's
right.
what we think.
Amen to that.
Right.
And so I was like, this is what I want. And, for a 15-year-old, it was like driving a certain type of car and having a certain size house. And my job, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew it would have a nameplate on my office door and I would carry a briefcase and wear a suit every day. That's all I knew. And I used those 3 things. There were probably 2 more. And I used those 3 things as the guiding vision of what I wanted for my life. And I decided that every single decision I made from that moment forward were either going to take me closer to or further away from those 3 things. And so when I made decisions of, do I want to go to this party with a bunch of kids and do things that we shouldn't have been doing? Does this decision take me closer to or further away? And that's what kept me off of drugs in the late 90s, which was really popular with all my friends. That's what kept me from not going out and underage drinking all the time and getting into trouble, because I used that one thing to guide my path. And because of that, starting a business at 19 just kind of fit because of the vision. It's like I had the end goal in mind, and then I reverse engineered that outcome, which is why I talk about reverse engineered outcomes in the book, because we don't need to know the how. We don't need to know the step by step. But if we don't know what we want clearly and vividly and be bold enough to go after it, then we're going to end up creating a life that's more like a cage and not something that we're inspired to show up at every day.
Oh, that's so good. And that's exactly what we talk about with our clients is reverse engineering. And what do you want out of life? Just don't have a business just for the sake of business and grow it for the sake of growing it. What do you want, right? Have that end goal in mind and then work backwards.
Right.
Definitely. And I think this is great advice, even for someone that's 19 and you did this, but older people really take a look at every decision I make is going to bring me closer to my goals or far away from my goals. And one thing I always think about is eating, right? Okay, is this donut going to get me closer to that size 6 that I want? Or is this nice salad going to get me closer, right? So it really is every decision that you make, there's a consequence, good and bad.
Exactly.
Right? That's right.
So how did you turn that then to, you didn't learn about money. I mean, your family didn't teach, I'm sure they were great parents, but we're blue collar. We come from blue collar backgrounds as well. So we know,
Your father was a mechanic.
My dad was a mechanic. My mother was a secretary.
Oh, my goodness sakes. That's never happened.
In fact, that's my dad right there.
Yeah, right. Dad, why are you calling right now?
You're like, hi, Dad.
Right. Okay, right. Or it's one of our kids asking for money. So we come from that, a blue collar background. So we weren't taught money, and you hadn't gone to school yet, or you didn't go, to learn about money. Mm-hmm. How did you transfer that understanding of the goal setting of reverse engineering to the investing side? How did you do that?
Yeah. So my first exposure to investing was also books. So I had Rich Dad, Poor Dad was like the book back then, Yes. So, and that was when it first came out, when Robert and Sharon wrote that. And now I'm fortunate to have had conversations and talks with both of them. So it's a really cool full circle moment, how that happens. And then another book I read, The Millionaire Next Door, and it talked about how wealth is silent, and how it whispers more than being loud, like rich tends to try to be loud, right? And about how most people just, buy cars that are used and depreciation and bad debt. And, I just learned all of those concepts. And I think because I didn't have so much input in my life in that area, I just believed the experts that were saying it. So to me, it's like, I didn't have proof that they were wrong. So why don't I just try? And it just made sense to me that okay, well, numbers are numbers. If I buy a $40,000 car and then you drive it off the lot and it's worth 30, why wouldn't I let somebody else do that and just buy it when it's already at 30 and still under warranty? So I just started doing that. And then I bought my first property when I was 20 years old. And then from there, I bought another and another. And I realized at a very young age that you can either have hobbies that take from you or hobbies that add to you, add to your health, add to your wealth, add to your joy, or add to contribution that you're giving in some way. And so really early on, does this take you closer to or further away? But then I also started to stack up anything I was doing by one of those 4 things. Does this add to my health? Does this add to my wealth? Does this add to my joy in some way? Or does this add to the impact that I'm giving? And if it didn't fall in one of those, it wasn't for me. So that was another thing. It really made me start investing in real estate as a hobby, that I enjoyed it. And I was able to see that it wasn't just making money in my business, but now I was making money elsewhere and having multiple streams of income. And then it kind of got addicting as I was in my 20s.
And were you buying the properties in and around the Pittsburgh area, or did you live somewhere different? Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh. I was picking up $23,000 properties, $50,000 properties. I mean, it was just like I would, buy, the first one was $23,000. And I went to buy my dream car because I was starting to make money in my early 20s and more than I had thought. And I thought, this is time I'm going to go buy my dream car. And it was $28,000. And I remember a client, Marion, she was a real estate agent who I then worked with for 20 years, buying a bunch of properties with. I said to her, hey, I saw this big pink sticker on this house down the street. I said, it says it's under foreclosure. What's that about? And she explained it to me. And I said, how much is it? And she told me it's $23,000. I said, well, I want to buy it. So I made a decision to buy that house and not that Jeep. That Jeep today wouldn't be worth more than $2,000, not to mention all of the costs that I would have had to, keep up that vehicle.
Exactly.
And that house cash flowed every single month, year after year for 20 some years and appreciated 10x what it was bought for. So when you do it, you see really quickly that that's how you're going to be able to retire early and rich. And then I was really paying attention and just started doing it over and over again.
That's amazing, because most of the people that are in our audience are couplepreneurs, or husbands and wives that own a business, and they're going to be a little bit older, probably have kids. Something like this, parents, teach your kids this at an early age, especially if you never learned it, right? Yeah. I mean, that's life-changing for, you don't have to go to college, right? I mean, college is fine for some, whatever, but doing something like this is to create your own freedom at such a young age. Parents, have your kids listen to this.
And on that note, Candy, how would you recommend teaching these kinds of concepts, to our children?
Oh my gosh. Well, first off, I think it's understanding. And I know this is hard because parents are already pulled so thin. You're doing so many things and you're trying to be involved. And so I don't mean this to say that you need one more thing, but it's the reality that a lot of parents I hear say they need to teach this in school. Yeah. I've been hearing that for decades. They're not going to do it. No. So it really is up to the parents, even if you don't have the time or the ability to teach them, get your kids involved, having them read books like my book or other books that are great books. Doesn't have to even be mine. Mm-hmm. Mine is really simply put that a lot of kids can read it, and it's broken down in that way for that reason. Mm-hmm. But also getting them involved and having conversations about money with them, maybe sharing some of the mistakes that you made and why it's important and what you would do differently and what you know now. Also understanding, I shared a few things on one of the news interviews that I did about ways that you can gift your kids in money in a different way, rather than just paying for every single thing that they ever ask for. Give them a budget every single month and have them actually leverage that. You need to go school clothes shopping. Well, instead of just buying everything in the cart, be like, you have $400 to get all your school clothes. I don't care if you buy 2 pair of Jordans or 14 outfits. That's how much you're getting, and actually teach them how to budget their money so that you can set them up for success later. Absolutely. Another thing is having them do, if they're under 18 and you have the ability financially to get them a custodial Roth IRA, you can probably invest around between now and their lifetime, tens of thousands of dollars, which will be millions of dollars by the time they retire. So there's a lot of things that you can do depending on where you are financially as well.
Okay. And something like, I just thought of this, a family project, like the family buys a piece of property and then renovates it together, goes through the whole process, right? And for the kids to learn what's all involved. And it could be something that turns into a family business. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. All right. For sure. Okay. Another question. Is it wise, and we're talking about Roth you just mentioned, but is it wise to use a 401k? So I've had a previous job, I've got a really good 401k, but I'm starting another business. Is it wise to take that money out to start a new business?
I never suggest anyone touching their 401k or their Roth IRA. Oftentimes people think it's only $5,000, it's only $10,000, but when you're investing, you're playing the long game. Period. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking short term and you want to reallocate funds, when you touch that, it breaks the number one rule of investing, which is playing the long game. Yeah. We know that over time, when we did all of the research for the book, it's 9.3 to 10% is the industry average. The S&P 500 is going to give you back on your investing. So when you keep that in there year after year after year and it compounds, that's what's going to give you long-term dividends. Mm-hmm. So I always say never to touch that. I know everybody has different beliefs on this. This is my belief. I'm really strong about that. Don't touch it. And there are so many ways for businesses that you can get business loans. I mean, there's a ton of different, I don't recommend any of them specifically because I'm not sponsored by them in any way, but there's a lot online that you can get business funding. You can go to the SBA like I did and get a really great rate. But anything that you're going to pay less than 9, 10, 8%, I use the rule of 7 in the book. Mm-hmm. Anything that you have an interest rate less than that, it's always good. It's better to have that type of debt than to be taking out something that you can get a higher percentage in on your investment that compounds over time and has tax advantages to it.
Got it. Okay.
Love it. Well, on that idea, as we start making more money, what's maybe a secret or something that we can do to pay less taxes as we are making more money?
So there's a lot. So I'm assuming these are a lot of entrepreneurs that we're talking to, right? So you already have perhaps an LLC. Oftentimes too, we have business owners that say that they're a business owner, an entrepreneur, but they're actually still a sole proprietor. Yeah. They're self-employed. They don't even have a business entity. So the very first basic step is making sure that you have a business that's separated from your personal Social Security number, your personal bank statements, all of that. Yeah. If you have that and you're making at least $50,000, $60,000 in NOI, net operating income in your business, you're probably going to want to look and see about maybe doing an S corporation so that you can start to reduce your self-employment tax. You know, if you have an LLC, you're paying around 15.3% self-employment tax. If you set up a S corporation, you could put yourself on salary, opens you up to some additional deductions, and you can really save on that self-employment tax. So that's one. Number two is understanding that the tax code is set up for large corporations that have massive amounts of money that pay lobbyists to get all of these different tax deductions into law. So leverage them.
Yes.
Right. So leverage them, right? Like leverage them. They're there. They're available. You're not doing anything wrong or illegal by taking them. Just make sure that you can substantiate them. Make sure that you have proper bookkeeping. Make sure that you know, everybody has a different risk tolerance, but make sure that you can sleep at night. Take legit, there's so many legit deductions. You don't need to take, you know, ones that are in the gray area or over the line, but really understand that, work with a tax strategist, somebody that's not just preparing your taxes in a reactive state, but planning them with intention so that you know as your income grows that you can leverage some of these Section 179 and the Augusta rule and the ones that I talk about that most entrepreneurs don't know about.
Yeah, I love the Augusta rule, by the way. We need to put that
it's great for your business, for sure.
Yes, exactly.
It's great for your business.
But that was
and then of course, outside of that, there's so many other retirement vehicles too, right? If you're self-employed and you don't have a solo 401k or a SEP, depending if you have employees, making sure that you get, because you could sink away over $56,000 or sometimes 25% of your taxable income. There's ways to put your kids on payroll in order to like have that money go towards their spending every month. So there's a lot of different ways you can leverage that. You just got to make sure that you're constantly learning about all of that.
There we go.
Okay.
Well, Candy, you know, there's so many, you know, you've done everything. Candy's done everything. It's all kinds of, that's what's great. And she makes it so clear and easy in her book here. But what is, you know, what's a common mistake that beginning investors do? Now, I know in investing, there's all kinds of different investing, but if we're just starting the idea of investing.
I've got some money and I want to invest it.
Yeah. What's a common mistake that we do starting out?
They look for an angle, a hack, a get rich quick, some way to skate what actually the fundamentals of investing are, playing the long game. It's what we do with a little will determine what we do with a lot. So if you're not in a financial position that you can do some of the crazy things that we talk about in the book, or you can't leverage and max out all of these investments that we talked about, what you do with even just $100, $500, $1,000 a month, by you not starting and you delaying, it is amazing how much it'll cost you. I just did a live 3-hour event the other day, and I had a chart that showed if you delay 10 years of investing in just a Roth IRA, which currently 2023, they just raised it. So $6,500 you can put in a Roth IRA. If you delay that by just 10 years, $60,000 over 10 years, it's all it would have costed you out of your pocket, $60,000 is the difference of $1 million in retirement. So it's what we do now. Like, and if you can't do now, I always say, if I told you that the only way to be wealthy is to take 20% of your earned income right now and start investing it, and you say, Candy, there's no way I can do that. I have this, I have that, then you're overspending for what you're making. So we need to do two things. We need to decrease your expenses by starting at least at 10%, setting up a State of the Union meeting with yourself, going line by line with your bank account, your credit card statements, your P&L statements every single month, 2 hours in your calendar, and see what you can start reducing, just 10%. And then let's see how you can increase your revenue by just 10%. People want to double and they want to 10x and they want to do all these things, but then they go through a whole year, right? And then they don't do them. But what would you have to do right now in the next 48 hours to increase it by 10% and decrease it by 10% your spending. That makes up the gap, right? The larger the gap, the greater your net worth. That's really what it boils down to. The least amount of expenses, the higher your income. Now that's your assets are going to determine your net worth. So we need to start with just getting, if you can't do 20% now, do 5. If you can't do 15%, do 10, but you got to start now, because that habit, what you do now will determine how much you spend. If you spend all your money when you're only making 50 or 100 grand, that habit, when you're making $1 million or 5 million, you're going to be spending it and just buying more things. I see it all the time.
Oh, right on. I know we're very transparent, and I'll be transparent. You know, coming from a blue collar family, we had nothing. You mentioned you grew up in a trailer. You know, we grew up in apartment projects and just didn't have the money. You know, you go to school. We had this. You know, I had the second hand-me-down clothes that you bought at Goodwill. In fact, it wasn't Goodwill at the time. I forget what it was called, but it was that kind of a thing. And so as we started making money, it's still in me. Even to this day, it's still in me to want to spend money and to have nice things. And I always have to check myself. I've always had to check myself all through our businesses. To be careful not to spend, not to spend everything that we have, and to invest and put it aside.
Well, one, it's amazing that you're that vulnerable with your community. So I just want to acknowledge that. And anyone that does have that, I'll just give you something to consider. Anyone that has that, like you want to go spend, think of it this way. Rather than seeing a price tag on something, I want you to change it to a time tag. If that item had a price tag on it, but rather than it being a price of $1,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 car, how many hours of your life, how much time do you have to trade being away from your spouse, your kids, what's important to you, your church, your hobbies? What do you have to give in order to buy that thing? And so I find that when we start to associate how much of our life we have to give away to acquire something that's going to depreciate, or we're not going to wear next season, or we're not going to get enjoyment. We drive it off the lot, and that happiness, that dopamine hit is so short. It's so fleeting, right? And so I think that when we look at it that way at time, it somehow loses the illusion. And then the other hack is 48 hours. If you find something that you want to buy, you kind of like are battling with it. Oh, I don't know. Give yourself 48 hours and see if you still want it. Yeah. The cool down period will make a huge difference.
Like
that's the discipline.
That baby blue Bentley we saw the other night.
Yes.
No.
I told the lovely Laura, I need that. And she said, no, you don't.
No, you don't. You think you do.
That's right. I'll tell you, the Bentley's a funny, I'm only going to share this because you just said it. But 2 different times have walked into a Bentley dealer with the full intention of stroking a check for a Bentley. Yep. The first time was back in the early 2000s. And I realized that I could either do this or I could start a nonprofit. And I remembered, and believe me, I'm saying this, but it doesn't mean that it's not hard sometimes, but I remembered that. Does this decision take me closer to or further away? And if your goal is impact, and your goal is making a difference, and your goal is to leave the world a little bit better, I made the decision to start a nonprofit and didn't get the Bentley. Another time I went in to do the same thing. And so I think it doesn't mean it's easy. I'm saying these things, but they're still really hard. But we get to choose our hard, right? Do you want to walk away from the depreciating asset and have more impact and spend more time with your family and just be able to retire and do what you want, when you want, as often as you want? Like, to me, that's far better than a piece of metal with some rubber on the bottom. And really, if we take it one step further, if Bentleys all of a sudden were devalued tomorrow and they were no longer hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they're only $35,000, would you still want one?
Probably not.
Right? And so a lot of times, like, it's unfortunate and it's hard. I know it's hard, but when you strip a lot of that away, it gets a little bit easier to make the tough decisions.
Yes.
Sure.
And so that's the kind of a common theme here. And, Candy, for our audience there, Candy in her book gives details on how to create wealth. But a underlying theme that we seem to be discussing here, and what we've learned from our life experience and what we hear that you're really kind of speaking on, is it's not that you need to know a lot to create wealth. It's almost you need to control your emotions and yourself more to be able to create wealth.
Yeah. So it's a combination, like it's why the beginning of the book, the very first chapter is growing your way to wealth, which talks more about mindset and your beliefs and what you know, because everything that we know right now about money has either been caught or taught by someone else.
Yes.
So if we don't first address that, we're going to be swimming uphill together with us trying to figure out the tactics and the how-tos and what to apply. So it's far more about your mindset, your beliefs, what you do with a little, how you play the long game. And then all of those other things become really easy to apply. The how-tos and all the strategies in the book, if I can get you to a place to believe one, that you're worthy of wealth, and two, you have the ability to have it because it's abundant and it's endless. And three, it's here for you too. If you believe those three things, by the time we start talking about how to diversify or what type of investor you are, you're open to it and you're ready to apply it. But that's why that first part's so important.
That's good.
Love it.
And we are getting ready to wrap up, but I want to hear a little bit about your nonprofit that you've got. Go ahead and give it a plug. I know a little bit about it, but go ahead and let us know exactly what it's about.
Thank you. So I started Heal Animal Rescue back in 2006. And it was really just to, want to serve and help and support and give back to a community that I felt so blessed to have the level of success that I did, in my early 20s. And we've gone on, we have two locations now. We have a 62-acre farm sanctuary where we rescue all species of animals, from dogs and cats in the adoption center to cows, pigs, goats, chickens, animals that are abused or left behind when farmers no longer want to farm. And we have programs for at-risk youth, kids that are in the foster system, kids that have been abused, and they get to come and hear stories about the animals to develop hope and healing and to end the abuse cycle. And the interesting thing about why I'm so passionate about contribution and giving back was at some point in your life, when you make a bunch of money and you have a bunch of success, if that's the only reason you're doing it, like, you're gonna get bored. I promise you. And you may think, oh, that's really nice and easy for you to say. No, it's the truth. And it's why I'm so passionate about, it's why a whole chapter of my book is talking about giving and giving back. Yep. And I always say, if you just want to acquire a bunch of things and look rich, like, don't buy the book, because you've missed the whole point. It's not about creating a bunch of wealth. It's by truly living a rich life. And I believe that all of that happens through contribution and the impact that we make. So thank you for asking about the nonprofit, by the way.
You bet. Well, and that's part of it as you're making decisions, right? You listed the things on when you make a decision, and one of those is impact. And obviously, you're making a huge impact, especially the lives of kids. If you're bringing at-risk kids, that's amazing, Candy. Love hearing
Love that.
Yes.
So how can we, if we want to learn more about that, and also how can we get in contact with you, and or more importantly, how can we purchase the book here?
Sure.
Yeah. And all proceeds of the book are being donated to charity as well. So anyone that buys the book, you develop your wealth habits, and all proceeds go to a couple different charities, and Heal Animal Rescue is one. They're healanimalrescue.org. That's our website. And of course, I'm Candy Valentino, Instagram, TikTok, all the things, and candyvalentino.com. And the book is sold everywhere, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, everywhere that you can find them.
Perfect.
There we go. Okay. All right. Pick it up. It's great. It's been very meaningful to me.
Absolutely.
For you too. All
so
right.
We're going to head over to the club area for all of our club members. We're going to wrap up this episode of the Couplepreneur Life. So glad to have Candy be our guest. Candy, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to see you next week.
All right. You too.
Thank you, Candy.